water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years passed and my brother and I discovered the new Avatar, an airbender named Aang. And although his airbending skills are great, he has a lot to learn before he's ready to save anyone. But I believe Aang can save the world.
Previously on Avatar.
There's a man living at the Eastern Air Temple. He says he can teach me to control the Avatar state.
In the Avatar state, you are at your most powerful, but you are also at your most vulnerable.
What do you mean?
If you are killed in the Avatar state, the reincarnation cycle will be broken, and the Avatar will cease to exist.
What's happening?
You are going through a metamorphosis, my nephew.
The Dai Li remains loyal to you, Long Feng, sir.
Hello?
It is with the highest honor that I welcome the Kyoshi warriors.
We are the Earth King's humble servants.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Avatar Vlogs. This is episode 39 and 40, The Guru and the Crossroads of Destiny. Now, normally with these things I would do separate videos from them both, but admittedly I'm doing this because the place I could pull the footage from was only one video, so I'm just going to do it here. But admittedly these episodes do kind of flow into each other almost like a two-parter. It's basically just a two-parter, but not in name. It's just in practice, but not in name. So anyway, the first part, the Guru, Aang has to go to the Southern Air Temple to learn how to master the Avatar state. Now, he does this through a process of opening up the chakras in his body, which, time for a bit of a philosophy lesson, chakras are points of energy on your body where the energy you have swirls and collects, and they tend to get blocked because, you know, life is very messy, and so they can't flow properly. But through proper meditation and technique, you can open them and you achieve a greater sense of oneness with yourself and the universe. And for the most part, this episode is kind of where I learned about the concept of chakras, but going forth from there, I did do a bit more research, and while it is in many respects a tiny bit simplified, it is still there. It's kind of like watching Kung Fu Panda. Yes, sometimes maybe they oversimplify the philosophy of the martial arts, but it's still there, and it still does make for interesting story and characters. The one thing I'll admit that is kind of funny is there's one chakra they don't mention. So I'll just say there's chakras at the base of your spine, in your solar plexus, in your heart, this part of your throat, your third eye, and the crown of your head. But there's one other chakra, I will say it because this video is not for kids, so it doesn't matter. The seventh chakra is, let's just say it's down low. And being a kid's show, they can't really mention this one, but given how they mention it's the chakra of pleasure and it's blocked by guilt, I think you can put together where it's supposed to be. So, yeah, that's just one thing where even as a kid, when I found out about this, I'm like, well, wait, they gave the locations for all the other chakras. Why not this one, especially when it's the second one? I'm like, oh, I see where you're going with this. Okay, kid's show. Can't mention that. But anyway, Plot A with Aang is by far and away the best part of this particular episode, where it just deals with this really great philosophy, really great imagery, really great voice acting from Zach Tyler Eisen too. There's one scene that a lot of people always point to. For a bit of context, there's a scene where Aang is dealing with the, I think it's the heart chakra, and it's about sadness. And there's this phenomenal scene where he witnesses the entire air nomad race before him and how they poof off because they're dead. It's about sadness, and the scene is amazing. Like it's an absolutely fantastic scene. It kind of reminded me of in The Two Towers when Arwen is examining what will happen if she chooses to marry Aragorn and the disadvantages of choosing a mortal life. But it ends with Aang, having kind of a happy cry, And then I can't really replicate it, but he just says, "Can I have some more onion and banana juice, please?" And that's funny because throughout this whole process, one of the things he has to do is he can only consume onion and banana juice. I don't know why. I think it's so your body doesn't basically get, I think it's mostly so your body doesn't get constipated so you can deal with the process better. But after a while, and he's gone through this intense experience, it is kind of funny how he's almost starting to enjoy it and even take great joy in what he's doing. And so that's the A plot. And the B plot, again, is dealing with all our various factions of Team Avatar going to various points. Sokka finally meets up with his father again. I think this is the first time that Hakoda has been on screen with a speaking part, which was kind of cool. And plus, I'll just say, the scene where Sokka finally meets up with his dad, I don't know why I felt that. Like, that was, it's such a simple, but it's such a beautiful. Then you go to Katara, who is, trying to coordinate things with the Earth King and the Council of Five. And meanwhile, Zuko, having just got off of his fever, is now actually kind of happy. He's actually seen some good things in this life he's built with his uncle, how they now have a tea shop in the upper ring, business is good, and he's even starting to feel content and is totally more or less put the Avatar thing behind him. This is the one point of contention of this episode, but we'll get to that later. And then Toph, meanwhile, is trapped in a box, which I don't know. It's kind of funny. She's trapped in a box. To me, in fiction, whenever a character is trapped in a box, usually it's because the actor couldn't be on set, so they had to BS their way around it, like in Friends when Chandler was in a box, or in that episode of, I think it was Sam and Cat, when Ariana Grande was trapped in a box. But here, it's animation, so that's not really the case. They just need an excuse to have Toph away from the group for a while. But this does lead to probably the single most important development in the show. So it's been every element in this series thus far has their own strengths and weaknesses. Now, the biggest weakness of fire, for instance, is it's difficult to bend if you're in a cold environment. Water has the disadvantage that it's not always around you. But Earth's big disadvantage is that you cannot manipulate metal. So a lot of prisons, a lot of rigs have been made of metal because Earthbenders are impervious to it. In this particular case, Toph learns to metal bend, and that's in time with a scene that Aang had, where the guru basically says how the biggest illusion of life is the illusion of separation, whether it's the separation of the four nations or even the four elements, how even metal is basically a form of earth that has been purified. And because Toph can basically feel into the metal's core, she can sense those little bits of earth, and she develops metal bending. And all I gotta say, awesome. This leads to some of the best stuff later in the show. And it's very cool that Toph does discover this craft just out of desperation of trying to escape. Oh, I forgot to mention, at the end of the episode, she was captured. It turns out that letter to her mother was a lie, and it's the people who have been hunting her this entire time. They trap her in a wooden metal box, mind you, and they're taking her home. But Toph just wants to get out, and she develops metal bending. It's pretty awesome. Sorry, itchy leg. But things are also, of course, not fully on the up and up. So while you have all this going on, it turns out that Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee have infiltrated the Fire Nation, the Earth Kingdom, disguised as the Kyoshi warriors. And Azula, being the ever plotter she is, she's not only trying to seek out her brother and her uncle and the Avatar, she now realizes she is in the most prime position to take over the Earth Kingdom from the inside, because the Dai Li, of course, are on the verge of collapse, and she realizes she can utilize them to take down the Earth King and the military from the inside. So there's a lot of plottity-plot, trickety-trick going on, which turns out to be a problem, because when Katara finds out that Zuko is in the city, she gets captured inadvertently by Azula, and while that's going on, Aang was on the cusp of finally becoming one with the Avatar state, but after he senses Katara's in trouble, a la The Empire Strikes Back, he can't go through with it. He picks up Sokka, and they have to go back to the city to save her. Now that's where the Guru ends, and things finally really pick up with the Crossroads of Destiny, which, fun fact, this is the only episode of the series that one of the series creators directed. Now, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, because it's not in front of me and I don't remember it. But Yeah, this is another episode, easily one of the best in the series. I'd say this is probably one of the top 3 best episodes in the show. It's fantastic. So Team Avatar has now more or less come back together in Ba Sing Se, realizing something is wrong, but they can't quite prove it. They can't find Katara, but they just know something is afoot. And while Team Avatar is busy trying to figure that out, Azula is starting to make her move. She's now manipulating the Dai Li to help her, even though the Dai Li thinks they're a manipulation of her. And the rest of the episode is all these storylines coming in together, culminating with the fall of the Earth Kingdom. I know that's kind of a spoiler, but honestly, trying to describe the individual plots going on in this episode, you might as well just watch it yourself, because there's just so much going on. So, like for example, you have Katara finds out Zuko's in the city. She gets captured. Iroh comes and asks. Iroh and Zuko are almost captured by the Dai Li, but are separated. Then they have to go to Team Avatar for help in rescuing Zuko. As you can see, there's a lot going on. The episode blends this all together perfectly, but me trying to describe it is kind of a task and a half. But the episode is kind of in 2 halves. There's the first half where everyone is trying to figure out what's going on. Azula launches her coup against the Earth Kingdom and actually takes control of the Dai Li through, I'll just say, by far and away her best scene. I'll just show it to you right now. Yeah, fucking badass. Azula, in that moment, really truly did become one of the greatest villains of all time in that little speech. Fantastic. Oh, by the way, if you ever do meet Grey Delisle, she loves that speech, so feel free to ask her about it. She loves it. And the second half is kind of the final fight to escape Ba Sing Se. So after Azula has basically taken over the Earth Kingdom, the rest of Team Avatar is trying to escape, which leads to a phenomenally well done scene in the catacombs between Katara, Aang, and Azula and Zuko. Now, this is kind of the one point of contention that some people have with this episode, and in particular this aspect of Zuko's character development. So, as we saw in the last episode, Zuko started to seem to be happy for the first time, but a lot of people have suggested that it didn't feel entirely genuine. Not so much that Zuko was lying, but rather that the writers didn't fully... The writing felt a little disingenuous. Like, maybe disingenuous, but to me, I think that's kind of part of the point. Because sometimes whenever people do go through what they would describe as a life change, they'll sometimes go the exact opposite extreme as a way to compensate for what they've done, but that's not being honest to themselves. Like, just as a side note, I believe people can change. It only depends on your actions now, not what you did in the past, but simultaneously, excuse me, your past is not something that can just be forgotten. So when you try too hard to lean one way or the other, it kind of feels like you're just overcompensating and that something is still in you that's going to snap and immediately revert all of that. And that's kind of what happens in this episode. Now, with that said, it does lead to some very good scenes with Zuko and Katara. In fact, now's the time where we kind of have to discuss more or less the elephant in the room. So, as I mentioned before, you have kind of the main romance in the show, which is slowly between Aang and Katara, which, I've gone on and on about how I'm not a huge fan of, although it has its moments here. But the other side relationship that most fans kind of like, and I personally like the idea of dabbling in it, is the shipping of Zutara, which, by the way, for a certain few people who are watching, when someone refers to shipping in a piece of media, they mean, instead of just focusing on the main couple, like Superman, for instance, the main couple in Superman is Lois and Clark. Shipping is taking a romance that doesn't exist, but kind of playing with the idea of it. Like, for example, there'd be a ship between Superman and Jimmy Olsen, or Superman and Clark Kent, or Lois and Jimmy, or Lois and Perry White. I don't know, just something that's not an established canon relationship, but there's enough of an intrigue that it could be something kind of unique. And by far and away, the one that is the most popular and pervasive amongst a lot of fans of this show is Zuko and Katara. Now, in the series proper, they never have a romantic instance. It's always kept platonic, but this first scene with them, when they're imprisoned in the Crystal Catacombs, kind of shows how you could have had a very fascinating relationship from these two. In fact, even the creators have admitted before that they kind of toyed with the idea before they ultimately scrapped it because that wasn't where they wanted to go with it. But while they're in prison, they kind of bond over the fact that they've both effectively lost their mother to the Fire Nation. In Katara's case, her mother was killed, and in Zuko's, we don't really know what happened, but she was still taken away from him because of the war. And they kind of start to bond over this. There's initially some hostility because, as Katara said, whenever she imagined the face of the enemy, it was always his face. But as they kind of bond over their shared experiences, and Katara does kind of realize that Zuko has changed, she even offers to heal his scar for him with some of that water that she got from the North Pole. And in kind of a big moment of the show, she's the very first person in the series, other than Zuko, to actually touch his scar, which is a beautiful little moment. But unintentionally, it is any chance of Zuko's redemption in this moment is completely broken when Aang shows up. Now, for as far as Zuko's come, as I mentioned, there's still that seed in him that wants to get the Avatar, because at the end of all things, the Avatar in Zuko's eyes is ultimately why he's in this situation. And there's a brief moment, I don't know how intentional this was, but when Iroh and Aang come into the Crystal Catacombs, Aang and Katara hug, but then Aang gives this look to Zuko like, kind of like, stay away from my woman. And Zuko is not only shocked that the Avatar is in front of him, but I think in that moment, that little bit of unintentional pettiness from Aang is what totally snapped it. Like, Zuko laid his heart out in front of a person who he didn't really know, but he laid it out enough to show he cared about what she was going through. And for Aang to kind of throw that in his face, I think that's what truly set him off. Now, a lot of people have tried to argue that Zuko never really was meant to be redeemed in this bit, and I agree. I don't think he was meant to be redeemed. I do think it was kind of a ploy in that he's trying to tell himself he's good, but there's just something in him that says he can't quite go through with it. But when Aang gave him that look, that's the moment I think that snapped in Zuko that I'm gonna get this guy. And it's not even it's not out of jealousy for Katara, it's just out of the person who is the agony in his life, in his own eyes, spit in his face, basically. So this leads to a phenomenal action scene where it looks at first like Aang and Katara have Azula on the ropes, but then Zuko comes in to change the balance, and betrayal, action, the Dai Li come in. Honestly, this scene is fantastic. It's one of the best action scenes in the entire show, and is really the reason why this episode is considered one of the best. This whole scene is kind of rife. The best way I can describe these two episodes in a way is it's kind of a thesis on Tolkien. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but the first half with the Guru is all about the philosophy and the kind of spirituality and how this character fits into the divine fabric of the universe. And then the second bit is not only the story complexity and the great battles of betrayal, but there's this one scene which I might play, I might not. All I'll say is it's a moment of awe. Aang finally masters the Avatar state. He rises above the field. First of all, I'm sorry if I'm going back and forth. So the reason Aang couldn't go into the Avatar state is because the final chakra meant he had to let go of the things that bind him to this world, which in this case is Katara. But it finally came to a head where he realized he couldn't choose happiness and his own self-interest over the world. He had to sacrifice that. So he lets her go. He becomes the one with the Avatar state. And I like how enemies alike have to look in awe upon their Avatar. Like, they're not trying to fight him. They just have to look in awe at the sight before them. But in a moment that gives me chills to this day, Azula strikes him down. Like, again, it's like Gandalf versus the Balrog. You think there's a moment of victory before it is taken away from you in just this epic, tear-jerking, awe-inspiring moment. And the episode more or less ends. Katara takes Aang's body. She's able to heal his wound with the spirit water, but things are not in a good state. Again, as I mentioned back in the desert, the team is debatably more broken now than they've ever been. And so a little bit of behind the scenes things. What makes this episode kind of fantastic in that regard is, so on one hand, we kind of knew there was going to be another season, but there was a year gap between the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3, which nowadays that's practically nothing. Thanks TV. Takes 3 to 5 business years to get a season out. Thank you. but back in the day, that was kind of a huge gap. Usually for Avatar, there was a gap of maybe 6 months in between seasons. But partly due to the passing of Mako, they couldn't really produce the season as fast as they would have liked to, so they had to delay it a bit. But just imagine you're a kid in 2007 or 2006. I think it was 2006. And you saw this moment where Aang is struck down, almost died, and it ends with this line, which I'll show you later. And then you had to wait a year to figure out how it ended. And when you do find out how it ended, you're just posed with even more questions than answers. So, yeah, I don't know if I conveyed properly, but these 2 episodes are absolutely fantastic. This is absolutely a phenomenal season finale and one of the best episodes of the entire series. So with that said, I'm going to leave you on this. But until next time, onwards and upwards, my friends.
We've done it, Zuko. It's taken 100 years, but the Fire Nation has conquered Ba Sing Se.
I betrayed Uncle.
No, he betrayed you. Zuko, when you return home, Father will welcome you as a war hero.
But I don't have the Avatar. What if Father doesn't restore my honor?
He doesn't need to, Zuko. Today, you restored your own honor.
The Earth Kingdom has fallen.